All right, everyone. Good evening. Hello, Mary.
Hello. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for making it possible and honoring me with this invitation to be with you all. Thanks for also coming closer and sitting closer. It's a little cozier. So I'd like to start by sharing with you all a brief, about 4 or 5 minute video, sharing some of the, we'll call it an outline, kind of a visioning really, of the work that Mary was describing that we are doing in Crestone, and very much inspired by all of you, by the work you're doing with the Holy Grail Vortex and the crop circles, and the work that Mary and the Temple of Sakkara have been doing for the last 25 years. It is a great inspiration to us in Crestone. And we have decided, we have had land with us the download that the name, the Johannine Templars, is the stream that we do our best to embody. Johannine derived from the Apostle John. And if you look it up in the encyclopedia, Christianity from the beginning was divided into the Petrine, which is for Peter, that's Rome, that's the church, that's centralized authority, and the Johannine, the mystical, devotional branch of Christianity embodied in the Magdalene stream, coming really from the Holy See of Antioch, not from that of Rome. And as I'll share with you in the presentation, I became part of a movement to restore the original order of the medieval Templars. And that eventually led me to Crestone, where to a number of us, my friends and I, it seemed that rather than seeking legitimacy, we are the original legitimate order, that the only thing that mattered in the end was whether you are embodying an authentic Cathar, Templar stream, doing your best to actually practice the sacred sciences that were the core, the inner esoteric core of who the Templars were and who we are. And when I say we, I mean all of us here. So I waited until I got here before putting final touches on the presentation, because I just had the feeling that once I sat down with Mary and Gail and Pat and those of you I'd already met, that it was going to land more clearly. So please forgive me as I skip around somewhat in the presentation that comes up, because it's all been refigured and reborn in the last 24 hours. So with that, I'd like to just share with you a 4-minute opening video for our YouTube channel. My very dear friend, Reverend Maya Nartumid, has been receiving sacred science on a very high level for the last 50 years. And so much of it aligns perfectly and directly with the work that all of you are doing and have been doing for so long. And it feels like we are brother and sister spiritual communities with each other. And it does very much have to do with the sacred ark of On, which is residing, so we understand, in a 4th dimensional state within Mount Challenger in the San Luis Valley at Crestone. So with that, please give attention to the screen here, and we'll have a 4-minute video. And if we have some nice sound up for that, Steve, that'd be great. Thank you.
from the mystic San Luis Valley, home of the sacred Ark of On, a living laboratory of sacred science, home of the Johannine Templars, attuned to the blue star, Rigel, in service to the ascension of the human spirit, remembering the Jed pillar of ancient Egypt, inspiration for the Jedi Knights, the sacred pillar of the inner spine, practiced by the Christ in India, in the perfect union of divine love. A soul lineage preserved on the Isle of Iona, the sword and the Grail and the code of the Templars. It survived the persecution, and a light came to America, revealing the ancient truth that we are all children of one God. And this truth shall yet make us free. We remember the dream. Of the songmasters and the mystics. In a time of division, we remember the code. To defend the innocent, to embody compassion, and to seek justice with a sacred fire. We can stop the poison. We can restore the earth. We can ascend the heights. If we use the sacred tools of frequency and vibration, trusting in our Father, Mother, Creator, it's not too late.
When we speak of the sacred Ark of On, naturally many of us think of the Ark of the Covenant, of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and marvelous adventures of biblical peril. What has come to us and what Mary tuned into is the original of the Ark, which is a sacred center that long predates what has come to be known as the Ark of the Covenant. And what we have received, and it coheres and integrates into a story that unites all of the work that we've all been doing, is that the original Ark of On was brought to our planet in order to help us retain and strengthen that innate divine connection in our souls in the face of, well, let's call it interference, let's call it tampering, call it what you will, those factions that have service to self as the reigning dynamic, as opposed to the service to the good of all. That is the divine path forward, which we do our best to embody here. And so, the Ark of On originally resided in Tibet, later moved to Mount Sinai, later during times just before recorded history in ancient Egypt, had to be moved over certain ley lines in the earth in order to preserve and strengthen its power. Now, what has come for Maya, and you know, when I talk about this, everyone, I want everyone to understand, it's not that I am holding everything that has come through our organization in Crestone or through my friend Maya as being the gospel received truth of all time, and this is the way it is. I'm only sharing with you information and sacred science that, much as all of you have experienced with the Holy Grail Vortex, it works, it helps, it integrates with what we know intuitively and in our hearts. So it's in that spirit that I'm sharing with you this story and understanding of the Sacred Ark of On. And what happened as Maya has received it in biblical times, the nature of the Ark of On as a sacred power object radiating throughout the planet, helping us preserve our connection to the divine. Women have 3 heart poles or chambers. Men have 1. It's not that one is better than the other, it's simply that that's the way the polarity works. As such, only priestesses could work directly with the Ark of On. If a man touched it, the electromagnetic effect would be such that his heart would stop, and that's that. Good reason to let the priestesses work with the Ark of On. And when, after the deluge, after the pyramids had been re-energized 12,000 years ago, when it comes down to biblical times, those that we refer to as the Lords of Light, those high souls, masculine and feminine, who were helping humanity stay connected to the divine, working with the Hebrew cultures at that time as the yugas descended, and coming down from a golden age into darker times, descending Kali Yuga, for those who are familiar with the cycles of time and the yugas, a patriarchal culture began to emerge, which was not happy with the idea that only women could work with the sacred On. And it was seen that in order to accommodate this, if it was not accommodated, it would simply not go forward. So a tamped down version of the Sacred On, which is called the Ark of Grace, was created, what Maya refers to as the Ark of Karma. And that, and similar ones like it made at that time, are what is known to history as the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark in the Holy of Holies in the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. And so Maya received from her inner planes mentor, and for those of you who are interested in this work that's coming out of Crestone these days, you can go to YouTube to Blue Star Rising. It's a YouTube channel, Blue Star Rising, the Templar Awakening, as you've seen here. And you can see this story in more detail. But around, 2005 or so, Maya received from her inner planes mentor, whom she identifies as Thoth, Horah, of the Egyptian pantheon, and whom she has felt as a presence since she was 17. She's now 72. she received from him that at some point the Ark of On would move from its sacred resting place in Mount Sinai, and it's in a fourth dimensional state, right? We're talking about a trans-dimensional power, sacred power object, for lack of a better term. And it's actually what it is, what it's made of, how it works, what you would experience if you walked into its presence, are all shared in detail on Blue Star Rising. And she was told that at some point it would move from Mount Sinai to Mount Challenger in the San Luis Valley at Crestone, Colorado. And Maya said, oh, well, that's amazing. That will be amazing someday in 100 years or 200 years. And then she moved to Kauai from Crestone, and one day she received this very clear message from Thoth: it's done, it's time for you to come back. And she's like, what's done? What? The Ark of On is now in Mount Challenger. And may I ask, how many have ever been to Crestone? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, fair sprinkling. There are stories. Well, there's lots of stories in Crestone. I mean, it's a phenomenal place. Tales of portals, of UFOs, of people disappearing and reappearing. There are stories of, an old hippie mountain man going up into a cave he'd been to frequently, and suddenly there's an opening at the back of the cave. And he went to this opening he hadn't seen before, and there's blue light and these shining figures. And you kind of wish he'd gone on in so he could bring back details, but he just had the bejesus scared out of him, and he ran like hell. But there are these stories in Crestone, so make of them what you will. But I can tell you that we can work with the Ark of On, attuning to it in the same way that all of you, in asking permission of Gaia, of Mother Earth, in order to work with the Holy Grail Vortex, that in that same very powerful way, the Ark of On is radiating this divine energy out. Now, we can't lose our connection to the divine. It's part of who we are. But it can and has been messed with and tampered with. And as we all know, now it's being very seriously messed with. And I feel the urgency of this gathering, the urgency of this moment, this time in history. And, you watch mainstream media and everything that we are asked to believe. And if you just stick with 3D and stick with the story, well then, this is just a gathering of 100 sweet, deluded souls who are just holding hands on the grass and doing prayers, and isn't it sweet, and aren't they a little bit daffy? Well, to my mind, this is the most powerful sacred work being done on the planet, right here. And I really want us all to own that, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your presence here and for doing this work. And, I was having a really wonderful talk with David Robeson, sharing his wonderful depth of knowledge about Shungite and many other different aspects of the work he's doing, and he'll be talking tomorrow. And it was just brought home to me. I've worked closely with Shungite. Once a week, Wednesday, on Cosmic Reality Radio, there's a radio show called Radio 5G, where I'm working with Nancy Hopkins, who's an authority on Shungite, on how it can counter the effects of 5G. And when I understand what's going on here in working with the crop circles, in the work that Steve Valdek is doing with the spinning of those powerful crop circles, and I see how the Shungite field, the remarkable qualities of Shungite, of how it works with intention. If you put Shungite, 3 nuggets in your bottle of water, and all the impurities go away, and then you wonder, where did all the impurities go? I have to clean some gunky filter, right? That's what you do with water purification? Well, there is none, because it goes into the quantum field, it disappears from manifestation. And that quantum field can be worked with intentionally. in the same way that with permission, with divine permission, we can work with the Holy Grail vortex and the toroidal energies that are practiced here. So I am in awe of all of you and the work we're doing, and also the gifts that are coming in, the divine gifts that are coming in, and they're integrating the Holy Grail Vortex Protocol, the work that Reverend Maya is doing with this 9010 quantum cube. You can find out more about that if you're interested on Blue Star Rising. The Shungite field, it's all converging. And to me, the most beautiful thing about it is that the lower profile it is, the better. The less we're waving our flag and going, here we come after the bad guys, like I did for several years with the Templars and the Human Rights Court. The more just humble and out of sight we are, the more powerful this will be. And it's just enormously inspiring to me because, well, I'll share a little bit more about my background. I'm going to skip forward to a place in the presentation because I'm a storyteller at heart. I was trained in the theater. I had a 15-year career as an actor. I was a story analyst for CBS Entertainment. In the movies and miniseries division. I've written screenplays and do one-man shows and things like that. And how many have seen Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones fans out there? Or okay. Well, at the end, Tyrion Lannister, the witty dwarf counselor, is in chains, and he says to all the powerful lords and ladies, and they say, oh, do you want to be king? Who do you think should be king? Our queen is dead, right? And he says, there's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it. No enemy can defeat it. And who has a better story than this one? The Holy Grail itself, on the deepest level. So, you know, when I'm listening to a speaker or something, I want to go, okay, sounds good. Who is this guy? You know, who is this guy in the leather jacket in the stifling summer heat? Anyway, right? It's holding my battery pack. And it's a cool jacket, so I thought, what the hell? So I'm just going to share briefly with you a little bit of my story. I'm going to cut to a place in the slideshow here, so I ask your patience for a moment. But while I'm looking, I'll say I'm from Oak Park, Illinois. And I grew up as one of 10 children, Irish Catholic. Who would guess? And my dad was a holistic pediatrician when there was no such thing, in the early 1970s in Chicago, of all places. And I had... there's a particular thing that I like very much, which is, you know, for us as Templars, and I think this is true of all of us, we are a bridge in time. The Templars were always really a bridge in time. And by that I mean, when there's a crisis in human history and sacred knowledge looks like it's about to be lost, the Templars, I call us the Cathars or the Jedi priesthood, whoever were known at any given time in history, come in to try to preserve sacred knowledge and do the best to embody it, because if it's just books in a library, who cares? It's a spiritual community like this one doing the best to embody it that makes it vital and living, so that it can be passed on through whatever crisis is happening, and it's safe to say we're in a crisis. Well, for me, being Irish, Catholic, well, okay, with an apology to the actual Irish men and women, if there's any in the room, I was born in Chicago, so that makes me a Chicagoan. Ich bin ein Chicagoan. But, you know, part of what led me here was a pretty madcap Irish kind of quest. I mean, the Irish had to be madcap dreamers because they were occupied by the British Empire. Good luck, okay? So that didn't stop us. Anyway, so you're looking at Skellig Michael. For any of you who may remember Star Wars, you may remember that there's good old Luke Skywalker and his disciple, the young lady Rey. And on they went. That's my great-grandfather. He fought at Gettysburg. He was 16. My great-grandfather fought at Gettysburg in the Civil War. And after the Civil War, he learned to dance the jig. No. After the Civil War, he joined up. This is going to be, how do I stop that? I don't know. All right, we're just going to go with it. He joined the Fenian Raiders. So the Fenian Raiders were a bunch of Irish veterans of the Union Army right after the Civil War who decided, well, what the hell? What are we going to do with all these military skills we have? We're Irishmen. We're in America. We've just conquered this huge, vast territory of the American South. Let's conquer Canada. Let's form an army of our own. We'll go conquer Canada and we'll trade it for the freedom of Ireland. That's my kind of dream, right? So that's what they did. They attacked Toronto, Quebec, Montreal, and the Canadians are like, what is it with these crazy Irishmen? We better become a country. So if you look at the history of Canada, Canadian historians will say, yeah, well, there were these crazy Irishmen who were attacking us and we had to become a country rather than just a British province. That's my grandfather. That's the blood I come from. So, and this is, that's my father and mother, Dr. Paul and Catherine Dunn. And I'm just going to have to ask your patience because this is going to be accented by continuous interruptions of jig music. So I'm just going to go with it. We're going to go with it quickly. This is, okay, that's my family. Okay, we were Catholics. Okay, there's the big house. And then there was a farm. And then I was learning how to milk cows. And then I was writing. And then I became an actor and I wanted to play Don Quixote. And then I was doing sword play. And there's me in the high school float as Don Quixote. And then I became an actor. And then I was really glamorous for a little while. And then I found my guru. And I gave up acting after 15 years and became a monastery cook at the monastery in the Self-Realization Fellowship Lake Shrine in Pacific Palisades. For those of you who know the Lake Shrine, all right, the beautiful Lake Shrine. And I learned to do kirtan, and I was an event coordinator, and I went to India, and I played Charles Dickens, and then I did the Shakespeare Mystery, Sherlock Holmes. Okay, anyway, there we go. Stop. And so working with lost history brought me to the Templars. It brought me to following what was happening with the rumored global financial reset and the $1 trillion lawsuit, for those who follow David Wilcock. I ended up working with a man named Neil Keenan in Indonesia, where I got this shirt. And so we were looking at the need to establish a new international court of human rights. And Neil, who's a very rough Irish-American guy from Newport, Rhode Island, said, okay, I got this lawyer, international lawyer. He's going to help us with the jurisdiction so we can take it to the bad guys with this international court. And I worked with this guy, very interesting fellow, and at the end of it, Neil said, oh yeah, by the way, that guy, that lawyer, he's the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And that caught me by surprise. So I worked with him a few months. We did some articles, never brought it up. We were about to hang up. Nice to work with you. And I said, by the way, Neil said something about you having to do with the Templars. And that was the magic word. He was never going to say anything to me about it. But then the door swung open. And for the next 5 years, I was intimately involved with a pretty formidable attempt to restore the original order of the Knights Templar from 1118 AD to its full status as a nation-state subject of international law in order to help create a viable and new international court of human rights. That's as much as I'm going to say about that. At the end of 5 years, there was an enormous grant on the table. And when I mean enormous, I mean really, 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 really enormous. And you find out who people are when there's that kind of money on the table. And it was a terrible, heartbreaking experience. And many of us, all of us in Crestone, the community in North Carolina and others, we all left the order at that time. But I count it as a blessing because it dispelled the illusion of we're going to change the world with this lever of power and seizing assets and putting people in prison. With an international court that has teeth and that's going to take the dark faction to justice. And that's an illusion. You're playing on their turf, you're playing, and they have the deck stacked so badly against you. This turf right here, this is where it happens. This is where the leverage is. Right here with all of us. This is what's changing the world. And it's a joy because there's hope here. You know, I did the rounds with the International Court and going on, you know, whistleblower shows and saying we're coming after the cabal and all that. So I ended up coming to Crestone. Sheer blessing, you know, the divine will just pull whatever strings is necessary to drop all of us where we need to be, when we need to be there. And I briefly dated a woman who knew people in Crestone. And she said, I'm taking you to Crestone. You say you're a Templar, you've got to meet Reverend William Bueller and Reverend Myron Artumid, and you've got to come to this Sacred Valley. So once that was accomplished, you know, she went her way, I went mine, but I ended up coming to Crestone. And it isn't necessary to come to Crestone. You know, it's, we carry the divine connection, all of us right here, and yet it's worth a visit. It's definitely worth a visit as a place to go for retreat. The electromagnetic properties there are extremely unusual. It has the largest freshwater aquifer on the North American continent. It goes down 30,000 feet. Underneath that aquifer is an enormous bed of crystals and gold. And this creates electromagnetic properties that, apart from portals and ETs and rumored cabal encampments and rogue CIA operations on the mountain and all that, it has the effect of accelerating our spiritual evolution, if you're willing. We've got a story in Crestone where people say, oh, look at this sweet remote valley. Look at this beautiful wilderness. It's 4 hours from Denver. I got to buy a property here. So they buy a property, they hit the energy wall. And in 3 to 6 months, they are gone because they just can't handle it. So they buy property, they go crazy, they leave. Or even worse for us in Crestone, they buy property, they go crazy, and they stay. So, I mean, there's a lot of us in Crestone, and I can tell you, you know, it's like evolve or leave is kind of what the valley says to you. The best way to enjoy Crestone, it's an interfaith mecca. There are 24 different lineages and traditions that have beautiful ashram centers and temples and retreats. The tribes, it was the sacred valley to them. It was called the Bloodless Valley because all the medicine men and young people on Vision Quest would come there. The tribes would not fight each other in that valley, and they came from all over, from the Southwest, from Central America, and very far, because of the energies in the Sacred Valley. But they didn't live there. They didn't build permanent settlements there. It was a place to come and commune with Spirit, experience breakthroughs, and then go back to whatever your Dharma is. So after so many of us left that old Templar order, we founded the Sacred Academy of Geoenergetics. SAGE is the acronym. And I tell you, I was so heartbroken by that experience. I lost some good friends when we had to part with that order. I didn't even want to hear the name Templar because I had fought so hard for it, and now it had been besmirched in my mind. But you know, we can't let them do that. If you look up, go on Google and take the name of any high and sacred order or movement or brother sisterhood in history, and you just put the phrase, the truth about, ... and fill it in with the Franciscans, the Jesuits, the Masons, the Templars, the Jews, anyone, any high and holy movement or tradition, and you will see the defamation, the smears, the besmirchment. Is some of it true? Of course it is. The pedophilia plague and sins of the church, that's real. And just as with the Templars, just as with the Masons, just as with all these other movements, the aim of the dark faction is to make us lose all faith in the brave, true, good men and women attuned with the divine who are part of these movements and streams in history. So, but I got overwhelmed, you know. I mean, the truth about the Templars, oh, they're Illuminati. Oh, they worshipped, you know, Moloch. They spat on the cross. All these, there are still people out there repeating these defamations. And how many are familiar with the story of Jacques de Molay? And see those who know Jacques de Molay? Okay. So on October 13th, Friday, October 13th, Friday the 13th, in the year 1307, the Templars had lost their day job. Their day job was protecting the pilgrims on the way to the Holy Land on the Crusader occupation, and they got kicked out of the Holy Land by the Saracens. For 200 years, they had been the prestigious order of chivalry of Europe. But they had lost their day job, they lost their prestige. The inner esoteric practice was their real mission. But when they got kicked out of the Holy Land, they were still the most powerful entity in Europe. The French king owed them huge amounts of money, and they were a rival power base in his realm. So that's what happened on October 13, 1307, was a very long-planned takedown of the Templars by King Philip IV of France. And so the smears from that day, they were tortured, they were made to confess to false charges, and it was a sort of a laundry list. Whenever you wanted to besmirch anybody in those, let's take out the laundry list of false charges, and let's see, sodomy and spitting on the cross, and so Jacques de Molay was the last Grand Master of the Templar Order. 50 Templar knights were tortured, confessed, and then burned at the stake. Jacques de Molay and 2 other Templar leaders were imprisoned for 7 years, tortured, and at the end of that time they were led out to a platform in front of Notre Dame in Paris to have their sentence read out, that the order was false, it was Luciferian, it was evil, and that they would accept the sentence of life imprisonment. And so all the public gathers, and the cardinals were, oh, we're going to read out the sentence. And as they were about to do that, Jacques de Molay and 2 other Templar knights stood up and said, the confessions are false. The order is pure. We betrayed our brother knights out of fear of the flames. But we renounce these confessions. They are false. The order is pure. And King Philip was so outraged that they hastily put together a pyre, and they were very slowly burned to death that very day, refusing all offers of pardon. And that is why the Templar name survived that defamation, because that legend spread all across Europe. The ashes from those men were collected as relics because they knew these were saints and that the Templar order was, in fact, a pure stream from the divine, at least as best as the human beings could embody it. So I just needed to tell that story, and we all know what happened in 1244 with the Cathars. And 2 Templar Grand Masters were Cathars. It was essentially the same stream. But as now, you had to lay low. You know, the Cathars, they didn't need to lay low because they were all through the Languedoc. They were a living culture across much of Europe. So it took 20 years of brutal genocide to destroy the Cathars. So the reason I bring all this up is that I was so heartbroken that I didn't want anything to do with the name Templar, but Reverend Maya said to me, Michael, we cannot surrender the sanctity of this name. So, okay. And I was, at the end of that time, when I left that order, I was the Grand Commander of the order, which is to say number 2 to the Grand Master. I was in charge of a lot of missions and work. And I just didn't want another patriarchal title. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going there. If we embody a Templar stream in Crestone and you want me to help lead it, we got to come up with some more true name that is not reeking of the patriarchy. And so Maya said to me, well, here's what I receive. You will not find this name, this word in any dictionary. I received that it is a Proto-Celtic word from 2,500 years ago. And the word is Caoillich. It turns out to be related to the Irish name Kelly, and which turns out to mean chieftain, but it essentially means lineage protector. So I was willing to accept that word for what help I can give at this time. And Maya said, you cannot just call it the Templars, the Johannine Templars, the mystical branch of Christianity from which came from the Magdalene, John the Beloved Apostle, which is the heart of the Cathar movement, which is the heart of where the Templars came from. Maya receives, whether you can believe it or it fits with your worldview or not, that after the resurrection, Mary Magdalene bore a child to Lord Jesus, conceived on the Isle of Iona in Scotland, and that this was the beginning of a Templar stream that later formed into the order. We don't hold that as some sort of point of doctrine that you've got to believe. It's a story that Maya received that resonates for some of us, so I share it with you briefly. So, through a really cool unfolding, this sword is here tonight. This is the sword of the Johannine Templars. The sword came from Glastonbury. The blade was forged in Spain, and it belonged to my dear friend Reverend William Buehler, who was one of the greatest living authorities on the grids of Gaia and how the Templars used them to create sacred space, sacred temples, how to activate the ley lines of the earth. And his knowledge of that goes back to the Sinclair family in Scotland, to the pre-Columbian voyages to America. And so when Maya urged me to accept that we could and should carry on the Templar stream in Crestone, working with the Sacred Archivan under the name the Johannine Templars, at that time, Bill gave me this sword and said, this is the sacred sword of the order. And it has the name Excalibur written on it, but its Johannine Templar name is Argo. And it was consecrated in a ceremony with Reverend Buehler, with Bill, and Reverend Maya in Crestone in March of 2017. And what Maya received at that time was that this sword has been blessed with sacred codes that it carries as a vibration, and that when conferred in ceremony, in a knight or dame elevation, a knighting ceremony, that the codes carried by the sword can land in the hearts of those for whom those codes are meant, who carry the corresponding grail within them to receive, because it's the cup and the sword, it's the grail and the sword, that's the unity. And so for those of us in whom these receptors are waiting for these blessings, they land and they strengthen us and inspire us. If it doesn't happen to be your lineage, if it doesn't happen to be your stream and you are touched with the sword, well, it passes through you, with some blessing, no doubt. Maya said also, what she had received is that if the sword touches in ceremony those who have come to the ceremony with false intent, that it will rebound upon them. That's karma. I don't think there are any here with false intent. But I just share that with you because it's the story of what I believe and experience is carried here. And, we're just one group, stream, order. As we know, there are hundreds, God willing, throughout the world who are doing the sacred work, who are gathering together, who are learning and applying the sacred science in this, as Mary says, this crisis of free will. But this isn't a small one. Here, what's going on here in Allegan is not a small thing. And so I am very honored to confer the codes and blessings of this sword, if she is willing to receive them, onto our own Mary Hardy at this time. And so let me read this first, Mary, and then as you don't need to get up, I will come down to you, okay?
Will that put the blessing on all of us?
Yes, it will. It'll put the blessing on all of you who, in your hearts, receive it and ask for it. It's your own free will choice, because we are the church of love and free will, yes? So, all right. So let me share with you the words that we say in the Johannine Templars when we confer the blessing of the sword. By the power of universal truth and through divinity, as expressed through sacred geometry, expressed through all living things, and by diligent pursuit to re-establish the high techniques of healing lost for so long to this earth, and by the unconditional, eternal, undying, and perfect love of God, the creator of all things, the source behind the source, life behind the life, joy behind joys, love behind loves, happiness behind happiness, ecstasy behind ecstasies. And in the presence of those great beacons known as the luminaries, both of these realms and beyond, and by the presence of the angels of light, who act as messengers as well as purveyors of God's truth in his creation, I do now and forever acknowledge all of you as knights and dames of the Johannine Order of the Temple of Solomon, of the ancient priesthood of Melchizedek. Walk in humility, but walk in truth. Bear the truth as an Olympian bears his torch. You are hereby given a mission to clear the way for the light as the higher ages ensue. This is not just your charge, it is your privilege. Know that the kingdom of light is in service to God, and it shall be recognized by its fruits, its actions, and by its deeds. The truth is simplicity. The truth is symmetry. And in that symmetry is perfection, beauty, and grace. The false light is complex, duplicitous, misleading, and confusing, and you will know it, and all of its purveyors by its fruits, lies and deceit cloaked in half-truths. And know this, the forces that work with you were sent to you by the Lord Jesus Christ, our beloved protectress, Mary Magdalene, the Divine Mother, and the Heavenly Father himself, Let all those with whom you have contact know you by your fruits. No matter how tired, no matter how hungry, no matter how busy, no matter how wealthy you might become, let nothing ever stand in the way of your charity, your love, and your goodness. Keep this oath. Keep this code, and the way before you will be eternally lit. And so it is. Mary Hardy, are you willing to receive by your own free choice the blessing of this elevation?
Yes, please.
In the name of our Father, Mother, Creator, and of all the saints, angels, high angelics, and high beings who gather here in blessing, as Caliph of the Johannine Templars, you are now Dame Mary Hardy of the Johannine Templars, and I thank you for who you are and all you give.
Thank you.
Dame Mary.
Thank you, Dick. Our teacher who gave us the idea to build my son John a pyramid was John, the beloved author of Revelations. And that is where our information comes from, is Brother John. And he is in charge of the Templars. Thank you.
All right. So with the blessing of John, it's the Johannine. That's where John comes from. So it's all in flow and harmony. Thanks again. Oh, you know, one other thing. I completely forgot this image was up here. This guy going like this. You know what that gesture is called? Does anybody know what this gesture is called? This? It's called the St. John gesture. From St. John the Baptist da Vinci. So, anyway, it all works. Oh my goodness! Oh, holy smokes, what time is it? It's 8:30. This is it. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. So we are 60 seconds away from an extremely powerful, auspicious astrological moment known as the Sky Temple. Gail, perhaps you could come up and share this with us.
Because at 8:30, the sun set at the exact moment that the moon rose, and they call that Sky Temple. So the sword has been charged with the energy of the Sky Temple. So all of you here present, and then all of you who watch this video will receive the energy and the blessing of that as well. So welcome to the Sky Temple and the Temple of Sakkara.